Hey, this is your host, Mae Renfroe, and welcome back to another episode of Thoughtful Thursday, where we have food for thought. And today, with my guest, we're going to be talking about her journey with eating disorders, but being healed through Christ. Yeah, so welcome, Nikki. I'm so glad to have you here today, all the way from London.
Yes,
London,
thank you
and
so much
I'm
for
up,
having me.
yeah, and I'm up here in Alberta, Canada. So we're long way apart. Yeah,
Yeah.
so my guest, Nikki uh, Nhiyra, is a London-based writer and performer. Her debut book, a memoir entitled "The Truth Shall Set You Free," it chronicles her journey from struggles with eating disorders to healing through Christ. She is passionate about stories of hope. As the hobby, she runs a YouTube channel called Artist Archives, where she shares her journey as a multidisciplinary artist, and she is in love with Jesus. So,
Yes, I am.
Nikki, I'm excited. Share this your journey with the eating disorders and finding
Mm.
healing. And so would you like to go introduce yourself a bit more? Anything else you would like to tell us about yourself and open as we
Yeah,
open here?
absolutely. Yes, like you said, I'm Nikki. This is my debut book, which is exciting. I always say that I never really expected to write a memoir, but God had different plans in store. When God gives you the instructions, you've got to obey sometimes. And but outside of writing books, I write plays mostly. I write plays and I'm a performer as well, and I document all that on the YouTube channel,
Yeah.
like you said. But yeah, this is the first sort of work of creative nonfiction that I've put together and put out into the world.
Oh, wow. Yes, I will have to definitely check that out.
Yeah,
There.
yeah,
Okay. Sounds
definitely.
interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So would you kind of like to take us on your journey with us and
Mm.
how that started and how you're on the other side now of this?
Absolutely. So I'm based in London. I have a wonderful, very loving family. And as a kid, however, I started sort of dabbling, I guess, in maybe more disordered eating tendencies, which I suppose is slightly different from a full-blown eating disorder. But it was more of just some insecurities that were really playing on my mind. And I think as a kid as well, sometimes you don't realize what a dangerous and slippery slope it can become. And
Mhm.
so I sort of started restricting meals and hyper exercising essentially, and just being really, I think, just very cruel and quite hard on myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
And this then sort of blew into like a full blown eating disorder. And at the time, it was a case of nobody really knew around me. So I hadn't told my parents, I hadn't told my friends or anything like that. It was very secretive. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of it stemmed from there were a few things. There were some, like family issues that were happening at home, but then there was also I wasn't really enjoying my time at school as well. And so I think that culminated in sort of loneliness
Mhm.
and just angst. Teenagers can be a bit angsty sometimes as well.
Mhm.
And so that ended up being like a 6 year battle. So it went up into my
Oh,
early
wow.
20s, really.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And a lot of that without people knowing actually until I got to university and sort of was able to open up a little bit more about it. And something that made it quite tricky to seek help, I suppose, was that for a long time it didn't present in a way that people expect eating disorders to present, or I did anyway at the time. There was less information out there. And for quite a few years, I had something that you would call non-purging bulimia, at least at the time, which is um, a form of people restrict their meals and then they would binge, but then they would try and remedy that with
Mhm.
exercise or diet pills or that sort of thing. But because a lot of
Mhm.
bulimia is represented as sort of like self-induced, like vomiting, I didn't know that what I had was a form of bulimia. I didn't know because I thought, oh, I'm not doing those behaviors. I don't have that. And so that
Mhm.
really meant that I kind of skated under the radar for a really long time because I didn't have your stereotypical symptoms that were showing up.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So so that and also what's quite interesting. So this whole time, I was Christian and I really did believe, I love Jesus, I believed in God, and I believed that God was capable of healing. But I think I really compartmentalized mental health from what God was able to heal. I think
Mhm.
I was used to maybe reading the Bible and reading about physical healing. Maybe my church as well spoke more about physical healing. And I've thought about this more growing up, in that I do think that I was raised in a good church. However, I do think there was too much of an emphasis on, like, almost like being happy all the time. Like, having faith almost means like there's no issues whatsoever. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah, so that's kind of how I internalized it anyway as a
Mhm.
kid. And so I think I felt very much like, oh, if I have an issue, it's just because I don't have enough faith. And I should just thank God and like get over it, kind of thing. That was what I was telling myself as a kid, instead of actually allowing myself to lean into any vulnerability and like actually take that to God. It was almost like I didn't want to allow myself any vulnerability whatsoever. Um, and it wasn't until I got to university, started going to a church there, that I think just had maybe a bit of a softer message, where it was like, you can bring pain and you can bring hurt to Christ. And like, God isn't saying you just need to get over it ASAP. I think that slowly started chipping away at some of that, insecurity, and that sort of started leading me on this healing journey. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Um, especially being young. So it's in your teens that
Yes.
it's started. Yeah.
Yes.
You have a lot of insecurities and just wanting to maybe fit in or
Mm,
yeah. Yeah. 'Cause
100%. And
I
I
have
think, oh no, sorry, you go.
I was just gonna I have 2 teen girls. So I
Mm,
homeschool, so they're not just out where maybe if it's in school and then see what
yeah.
but still, yeah, I know, with my daughters and just the things that they're going through. But go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna say that I think already body image for young women, like young girls, is already just like a huge issue anyway. Just the pressures that the world
Yeah.
puts on them to be a certain way, present a certain way, be perfect, all these like body ideals that maybe even nowadays I think it's probably even worse, because with like social media and models and influencers and all of that, which wasn't so
Yeah.
big back when I was growing up, but still was sort of beginning. I feel like I was at the beginning generation of like the Instagram coming up and all the filters and all of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but then I think as well, so the area that I grew up in England was in Essex, and it wasn't very diverse. And so I was one of the only few Black girls in my whole school. And I think that was another layer of, there was microaggressions and there was racism and there was almost like looking at my body as something other.
Mhm.
And so I do think that also played on my, in a very subconscious way. I wouldn't have been able to name it at that age. But now looking back on it, I'm going, oh, of course, there was a very sort of a certain body type that was seen as attractive. There was a certain type of beauty that I didn't fit into, because that's just not how I look. But as a kid, all you go is, oh, I feel like the odd one out.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And so did you feel with the way you were trying to eat would fix that? Like, was that the idea of how that's where this eating disorder started because you're gonna try to fix
Mm.
that insecurities that you felt?
I think that was definitely part of it. And again, I think I wouldn't have said that because I didn't know that's what it was at the time. I think looking back now, and I'm really interested in psychology. And so I've done a lot of research into, why do eating disorders start and that sort of thing. And it's something I talk about in the book as well, as to like, where were the origins of it? And I do think a lot of it was in this sort of, I don't feel like I fit in. But also, I had a lot of emotions. So I think that's another
Yeah.
reason that's cited for eating disorders, which is that usually people feel out of control, or they just don't have like a healthy way to manage their emotions. And so it becomes a coping mechanism, like someone might turn to alcohol or smoking or that kind of
Oh, yeah,
thing.
yeah,
It's like this way of like, I have this thing that's really rigid and I'm trying to control my life. And so I think
yeah,
part of it was also just feeling out of control as a young person, and
yeah.
wanting to gain some of that control back.
Oh, wow, yeah, and then maybe not really giving that over to God.
Exactly. So just kind of going, I've got all these emotions and I don't know what to do with them. And yeah, I wasn't taking them to God at all. It was sort of, how do I deal with this? Or how do I try and suppress it? But
Okay, yeah.
it's obviously not very helpful to suppress the emotions, because it's going to come out somehow. And for me, it came
Yeah,
out as an eating disorder.
yeah. Oh, wow. So when did that kinda come to a head for you, and it was you kind of found that healing and that freedom completely in Jesus, and had it
Yes.
conquered.
So there were two, maybe no, in fact, I would say there were three main parts of it for me. So the first main part would have been in my first year of university, where I sort of just had this moment of, do I believe in God or not? Kind of. As in
Okay.
I felt
Wow.
like, yeah, I felt
Wow.
like I was going to church a lot, and I was having these encounters with God where I was like, God is here. I'm feeling God's presence. I believing that God sees me and loves me and like is
Yeah.
able to bring me out of this. And that would be a
Yeah.
Sunday. And then Monday to Saturday, I would just
Mm.
be
Mm.
in this awful cycle all over again. And then it would happen again. I'll come on Sunday to church and I'd feel like held and whole. And then the Monday to Saturday would, I'd just be unraveling. And I think I just reached this point on one Sunday where I just thought, right, like I can't keep doing this cycle anymore. I was very, very depressed. I was very like trigger warning, but like quite suicidal at this point because I was very done with living in this cycle.
Mm.
And I was like, right, well, this is like God, you're either healing me. It was a little bit like I had like a cheeky like breakdown moment. I was like, God, you're either
Mhm.
doing this or like I just don't want to be here anymore. Was
Yeah. Wow.
so I remember, so I remember I sort of marched to my dorm room and I just I don't know, I just had the biggest
Oh, that's cool.
crying and praying and worship and pleading
Mhm.
session that I'd ever
Mhm.
had in my life, where all my whole life I'd been like, you can't be vulnerable, you can't be this, you can't be this. And like that all just broke and
Mhm.
melted away. And I was like, God,
Mhm.
I need you to heal me. I really cannot do this by myself.
Mhm.
And I feel like that was a huge turning point because
Mhm.
that reignited my faith because I really felt God's
Mhm.
presence there. And I just felt like there's a shift, like something has to shift
Mhm.
here. And so that was like a really big turning point for me because I felt like, okay, God heard me and God is with me. And it didn't go away like
Oh,
that. I had like
okay.
another relapse afterwards and like just more helplessness and that sort of thing. So I guess that was point one. That was like, okay, I believe that there is hope, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then
Oh, yeah.
the second really big thing that happened for me was I went on a church day away. This was the following year.
Mhm.
And we were listening to some talks, and it was talks delivered for university students around the country. And on the final day, there was a talk that I went to where um, the pastor, I mean, it was meant to be just like a regular talk. We were going to ask some questions, then we go home. But something happened whereby the pastor suddenly got like a word for someone who was sat in the audience. And everything very much quickly shifted because we were meant to leave, and instead of leaving we decided let's stay extra because we feel like God is trying to move in this space, like God is trying to tell us something. So we ended up staying and just praying more. And it was just such a beautiful moment. And one of the women who was also attending the conference, I'd been praying like, oh God, can you give me some kind of sign, can you give me some kind of promise? And she came up and she was like, wait, I have something to tell you. And she just gave me like such a message of hope. It was like she knew exactly what I was going through. She was saying, like, you're believing lies, there's lies in your head, and God is really angry with the enemy for putting these lies in your head, but you've been believing them. But there's going to be some healing that's coming. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's coming, sort of thing. And that really like struck me because it was everything that I needed to hear. And I almost hadn't even attended that session. It's like a whole chapter dedicated to that
Oh,
in the book
wow.
because it was
Yeah.
just such a
Yeah.
the fact for me to be there at that time,
Yeah.
at that space, for that word to come and the way, it was really miraculous. So after that I went, okay, something's gonna happen, God's gonna do something, but I just don't know when or how.
Yeah.
And then there was like a process of me trying to unlearn a few things. So I had to get out of like some very toxic relationships and environments that I was in as well. I was, doing my best to break the cycle of the eating disorder as well. I started praying to God to ask him to like let me know how much to eat and when to
Mhm.
stop because I
Okay.
didn't know
Yeah.
because there'd been so
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
years of not listening to my body
Yeah.
that
Oh, okay. Yeah.
you know, imagine I had, I don't even know, like a tiny bit of rice.
Yeah.
I would feel like overwhelmed. I'd be like, that's enough. Like I can't eat anymore. So I had no idea of like when am I hungry? When am I full? So I couldn't do it based off that. I had to do it based off
Yeah.
God, like, when do I start eating and when do I stop? And so I think
Yeah.
that was a huge turning point, because again, it was to do with that vulnerability. Like, God was almost like training me to be like, you can ask me these things, even though it sounds silly to you. Like, you can ask, like, I care enough about your body, and what you eat and your health, that you can come to me. I'm a good father, you know. Um, and then the very, very miraculous thing, which is the third thing that happened, which I think is the thing that prompted me to write this book, because I thought, how can this even be? Is I felt led at the beginning of the year to go on a fast, on the Daniel fast. And
Okay.
yeah, and prior to that, I had never really engaged properly in a fast, as in, you know, like my parents would fast sometimes, but it wasn't really something that I would, how do I put it? It wasn't something that I believed was important as a Christian. I know Jesus fasted, and I know, but I think I just always thought of it as something maybe quite Old Testament and more on like within the Jewish tradition. And so it wasn't really something that I'd practiced with any sort of interest. But for some reason, I felt led to go on this fast. And I was praying about it. I was going, God, are you sure? Because this is such an easy way to relapse, you know? Because again, I'm like, it would be me restricting. And like with eating disorders, you know, like the second you restrict, like the brain goes straight into its old patterns, and it's like, that's it, that's done. So I was really quite scared. But it felt like the right time. So again, it was a very God-led fast of, okay, how much do I eat? What would you like me to eat? But more like focusing on reading my Bible and connecting to God and that kind of thing. And so that was for 21 days. And after those 21 days, I never went back to any kind of eating disorder tendency ever again. Like, I never purged, never binged, never restricted. And it was just such a crazy thing, because I think if you said to anyone, you know, I went on a fast and I was healed from an eating disorder, they would look at you like you were crazy. But it's actually what happened to me. And I was like, wow, God is actually so good. God is so good. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So that is when he really set you free. So it's like during
Yeah.
that. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool, because it is, I think fasting is a biblical thing. And the Daniel fast, I'm not really sure.
Mm.
I don't know much about it, but it looks like I've heard of people doing it, and it is supposed to be a very healthy thing, very,
Yeah.
very healthy. So if it is like a very biblical thing, well, then it's kind of like no wonder why. I know he talks about fasting a lot, and Jesus talks about fasting. That's nothing I've done a lot. I've done it certain times, just a little fast, at certain times, to spend more time, you know, reading and in prayer for something
Yeah.
specific, like about a specific thing that was weighing on me, and it's like I just felt like I need to do this. So
Yes.
uh, so that really makes sense that happened for you, that you really set free. Wow. I love the incident when you talked about that was really a God divine kind of encounter at that the conference thing.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. My friend just finished reading the book, and so I just asked her like, oh, were there any points that resonated with you or stood out and that kind of thing? And she was saying it was that chapter where I was at that church conference. She was like, oh, it just gave me goosebumps, because like you could just
Okay.
feel like God's presence was
Yeah.
there. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad, because that's exactly how I felt. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Because you were just really praying and yearning to hear from God at that point, weren't you? You were just like,
Yeah.
God, you know, you got to do something, help me. And you were expecting, it sounds like you were expecting, okay, I know you can do something. I don't know when, I don't know how, but you know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what God's waiting
Yeah.
for. God wants us to do that, to be like that, you know, being yearning and praying and be a lot and be expectant, you know, and that's
Yes. Yeah.
so,
So true.
yeah,
So true.
yeah,
And I
that
think
is
it's
so neat.
that leaning in and really listening. So I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's so easy to get distracted.
Yeah.
You know, God
Yeah.
has something to say, but you're off doing a billion and one different things.
Exactly. Or listening to other voices, other, you know, that we shouldn't be,
Mm.
instead of listening to God and what he says, and really, yeah, taking time
Yeah.
to hear him and commune kind of with him. Yeah, exactly. I like that. So I was going to ask, kind of, when did your book come into being? So your book is like really new, is it? And
It's
when
really
did
new.
God kind of say, write this book or what?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So actually in my third year of university, I felt like this little nudge to write the book. I think my initial reaction was quite excited because I thought, oh, this will really impact people. And I think as I started, that's when I got a bit more nervous and a bit scared. But the idea came, so it would have come back to me in 2016, so quite a while ago. And then I don't think I started writing it until the following year, so 2017. And then I wrote it in a really weird way, in a much less good way than it is now. Because, first draft, it was out there. I thought, that's it, I've done it. Yeah. And then I reread it and I thought, oh, okay, this isn't what I'm trying to, because I hadn't really written it as a memoir. I'd written it almost as a series of reflective essays, which wasn't really what I wanted to do. So then I wanted to then go back and craft it more as creative nonfiction. So just to make it more, immersive to read, really. And so, it's been a journey. So really on and off since 2017. So it's been 7 years, really, in the making, which is kind of crazy. Yeah.
When did your book come out? I don't think I have
Just
that.
a couple of weeks ago. So it came out on, I get like the exact date. So on the 13th of October.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's just hot off the press.
Yeah, literally. In fact, we just had the book launch a few days ago, like 4 days ago.
Okay.
I threw a book launch party. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. So all those years kind of in the making of putting it together. So I bet God really, was really working, right, in your life at that time. And you probably had a lot more that you were really able to share, maybe more wisdom and stuff on it, right?
Yeah. That was one thing I think that kept on changing between each draft. I felt like I'd learned new things, or God taught me new things, or I was wiser. And so, I was able to add new things like throughout the multiple drafts.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And the title, how did you kind of come up with the title? I just think that's neat.
Yeah.
The truth will set you free.
The title took a while. In fact, it was originally called Vessel. And it was called that because I was thinking about how, God uses us as vessels for his word, and also vessel meaning, or can mean the body. Like the verse about, we hold treasures in jars of clay. I was thinking about like being a vessel for God's message. So that was the initial title, but I don't think it was very clear. And I just sat down and I had a brainstorming session and I prayed and I was like, God, please just give me the title. Because at this point I was like, come on, we've been writing this for a while. I need the title. And so I was writing and then, just suddenly just popped into my head, and the truth shall set you free. And I thought, actually, that kind of says everything that the book is about. It's about finding the truth of your identity through Christ, of who God is, believing in what God says about you and not what culture says about you, or the enemy says about you, or even yourself. And so I thought, oh, that's kind of the perfect title. And I think every time I've sat down and prayed, God has really just shown me a clear answer. Like, so even the cover image, that came from prayer as well. I think I initially tried to do it in my own strength and it wasn't working. And then I was like, right, let me pray about it. And then suddenly, boom, there was the idea. So,
That is cool. That's so cool, taking every detail of that book and stuff into prayer to God. And saying, what about this? What about that? Because it's like it's his story, that to what he's done in your life that you're sharing. And so, I can see how,
yes, literally that.
what to ask him, all these details and everything. And you're saying that's the truth about knowing your identity. That sounds like it just changes everything. The way, right?
Yeah, hugely,
How we do life, and we know who we are and whose we are.
Yeah, exactly. And like where you turn to when there's an issue.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. So, do you have like speaking opportunities? How old do you get to kind of help other women in this? Is it just the book, or how old does that look like?
Yes, so that's such a great question. And that's something that I really want to do more of. And so what I've just done is I've started an Instagram page called the Surrendered Recovery Project. It's very new, but if anyone would like to support it and follow it, that would be amazing. And my aim with that is really just to share uplifting verses and scriptures and references and images as well, that will help women towards a Christ-centered body image and towards like wholeness and recovery and that sort of thing. And yeah, so my ideal would be to go to and speak within various places really, so like schools, churches, youth groups, and really just share the story and get it out as much as possible.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh, wow. And those are places that could really use that and benefit that. And yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So I feel like, yeah, so this is a very exciting beginning to that. So everything
Yeah.
I think so far has been the written medium, but I would love
Yeah.
to go and speak as well.
Yeah. And share it. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Well, you never
yeah.
know what God has. And so as long as you're that willing
Yes,
vessel, I
it's
should say,
true.
willing to do that and to have the Lord speak through you and use you,
Mm,
that you never know. It's limitless, right? What God
mm,
can do. And
yeah,
he just does. He
so true.
need, I think it belongs for these willing individuals that will be there and help support others and
Yeah, yeah,
in their dreams. Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
100%.
Yeah. So, is there kind of anything else that you haven't shared that you would like to go ahead and share
Mm,
on here before we close? Any, if it's something from your book or just something that
yeah.
it's really important in your journey and you really feel
Mm, mm.
others really need to know.
Yeah, I have a couple of things, but before that, I actually had a question for you, if that's okay. I was curious. Um, yeah, I'm just really curious
Okay.
about because you're saying you've got two teenage daughters, right? Um, and I was wondering
Yeah.
whether has that ever been anything that's come up in your conversations together around like talking around mental health and like body image and that kind of thing, or if that's something that you've noticed as a mom, like, yeah, I don't know, because I think yeah, teenage girls are a very unique stage in life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. For my family, for any, I know most of the listening probably know I have 10 so children, but
Yeah,
so
yeah. So
six
good.
boys, 6 boys, 4 girls. But out of the girls, then just the 2 juniors, one's 17, one is should be
Mm,
turning 15 soon in a few months. Yeah, and then the younger ones. But yes, definitely more I think my older one, it just want to fit in more just with others
mm,
and we're worried about being make sure she doesn't get overweight though she's very slender and small built
mm,
petite and all but yeah definitely so I try to really help them in just being good and who God created you to be. I
mm.
want them to find their beauty and completeness in God
Yeah, beautiful.
and we have a lot of devotion books that I get and that I
Mm,
read that really help them. Devotion books and just books on finding your identity in
mm.
Christ and kind of what you're talking about. So your book will probably be one
Oh,
of them that I would like to
lovely.
get and actually read because I read a lot with my girls in the evening. We do devotion times. We talk, yeah,
Nice.
about a lot of things. That's important and just really trying to help them to feel good about themselves. And they well know the verse, we're
Gorgeous.
fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yes, perfect.
That verse in Psalm. Yeah. And that we're made in his image
Yes.
and that our beauty comes from the inside out, that
Mm,
comes from first
mm.
just from the inner, and knowing Jesus and having that hope and having that peace, having joy. And that's where the true beauty,
Yeah,
comes from that place and then and shines
amen.
out.
Yeah, yeah. That's so beautiful. I love that. And yeah, I love what you said about the devotions as well. And just, yeah, just that intentionality, I think is really lovely.
Yeah. Really trying to pour
Mm,
into them. Just yeah, like you said, really to know who we are, our identity in Christ, and then that can change and be more concerned what God thinks about us and not what other people think. And sometimes we
yeah,
can put,
hugely.
I put what we think someone else is thinking. It may not be like I have an older daughter that does
Yeah.
that. No, but she keeps telling me what people, and I'm like, you're putting your thoughts in their head, and they're not even
Wow.
probably even thinking that, right? You're thinking
And you
that they
don't,
might be
yeah.
thinking that. It's
Oh,
funny what we
100%.
do
And
to
I do
ourselves,
that as
right?
well. And then I'm like, wait a minute, you don't even know that. Where did this come
Yeah,
from?
yeah, but
Like, yeah,
you've created
questioning those
something.
thoughts.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, I think that's I brought a copy actually just next to me. I've got a copy. I thought I'd just show like
Okay.
people what it looks like if you're
Oh,
looking
okay.
it up. It's
Oh, cool. Yeah.
on Amazon at the moment in Kindle and in and paperback as well. So yeah, and yeah, it's a mix of, I think what's quite exciting and unique about it is that it's a mix of memoir, but then also theological exploration. So I tell
Oh,
you my
okay.
story, but then alongside it, I have chapters that are just focused on what does the Bible say about this part of the story, or the Bible
Oh,
say
okay.
specifically about mental
Yeah.
illness. So there is like
Oh,
almost like a
okay. Oh,
dual
wow.
narrative
Yeah.
throughout, which I think is quite unique. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So you can hear exactly, yeah, what the Bible says on that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So yeah, prayerfully it will help people. That's my heart for it, really. That it will help people that need to hear the story.
It can, yeah, be set free to
Yes.
live who God
Mm.
and created them to be, and not to be bound from these things of the world, what the society says. And yeah, it's really hard. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So was there kind of some last thing then you wanted to share before we close? And then
Um,
I will have your stuff
yeah,
when they find you and about your book in the description. So, but yeah, is there anything else that
have. I think those are the main things. I think, um, yeah, the only other thing I'd really add is just to just really acknowledge that I've had a really lovely support team like around me in terms of
okay. Okay. Yeah.
editors and
Yeah.
illustrators and beta readers and people who've just really come and helped create this book. And to be honest, like people from different parts of the world as well. So it's been like quite like an international collaboration in a way. And so I'm hoping that this book can really reach across different,
Yeah.
cultures. And I think it's doing something unique in that the eating disorder memoirs I've read previously have usually been written from more of like I'd say a Caucasian perspective and not even necessarily a Christian perspective. So I
Okay.
think that if there's someone as well who, because I think there are some unique struggles that people of color face when it comes to body image and body issues. This book does also tackle a bit of that as well. So yeah.
Oh wow, that's cool. So I'm glad you had all that support to do that and have that. So it's very Christian based, maybe compared to what's out there and
Mm,
found people, because we can't do this without Christ. That's what you said. It was Christ. So he creates your identity in Him.
100%.
Yeah. And what I was gonna kind of say too is that did you have a bit of a community as in helping you when you
Mm,
actual health journey too, right? When you were starting to be
yeah.
open, you were keeping it hidden, right? It's not like hidden where people, your family didn't even know. But I think it's
Yeah.
in sharing that you can get accountability and get someone to kind of support you, right? And encourage you and not kind
Yeah.
of keep
Yeah.
that covered. So you felt that was important too.
100%.
Would you encourage others to open up and to
Oh,
share or find a safe person, I guess, to talk to you and
hugely,
help you?
hugely. I think the same way you get secrets and lies that sort of magnify in the
Yeah.
dark. I think
Yeah.
eating disorders do the same thing, and things get worse if you don't tell people, if you don't have a
Yeah.
support system.
Yeah.
I did have a support system. I wish I had more of a support system.
Okay.
Um, in terms of it was quite difficult to access help from health services. So, like, in terms of that professional medical team, I would have loved to have had around me as well. But I did have wonderful friends who it was just useful to have them around, and family as well. When I did eventually open up, because no one can help you until you open up, right? So I think when I
That's right.
started
Yeah, you
opening
don't
up,
know.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, I was able to fall back on some of that support, and it made a huge difference. So,
Yeah.
um, I'm a big fan of. I started listening a lot to the Place We Find Ourselves podcast. Um,
Familiar.
and they're these. It's worth a listen. I think it's really good. So they talk about I guess like neurotheology, so combining psychology with theology and kind of seeing again like what does God say about mental health and that sort of
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm.
And they talk a lot about the power of community and about how a lot of the issues that we have stem from disconnection with people.
Mhm.
And so the best way to heal it is actually to find connection with people.
Mhm.
So betrayal and a lot of trauma, usually that's from
Mhm.
a rupture of a connection
Mhm.
with other
Mhm.
people or with God. And so it's kind of
Mhm.
saying if you want to seek healing, like re-seek that connection. And so I feel like
Mhm.
for me, it's almost like if you were hurt in relationship, you need to be healed in
Yeah.
relationship. which can be
Yeah.
scary sometimes. But I would definitely say people need community.
Yeah. Sounds like, wow. Okay. That sounds good. Some good advice for them, for those that are going through it right
Mm,
now, that are struggling, that are like, they want to make a change and see a difference, but they don't know, how.
yeah,
So, well, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. And I think all that you shared here will be very helpful, and then they can get your book. Sounds good. So I'll have
Thank
all
you
your
so much
stuff
for having me.
in the description. Yeah, thanks again so much, Nikki, for joining and just being open with us about your journey, and how you have the hope and healing in Jesus, right? And now that's what you want for everyone. So okay.
Yeah,
All right.
amen. Yeah.
Take care, Nikki.
Thank you
And
so
yeah, for
much.
everyone else, I'll be back here next Thursday. So all right. God bless.
Fab. Speak to you later. Thank you so much. Bye.